when we're talking about the success of WCW in that era, a lot of that success is in large part due to somebody who doesn't get the credit. That's Kevin Sullivan. Kevin Sullivan was one of the head bookers, maybe the head booker, depending on who you believe. But even Bischoff gives him his flowers and says nobody booked heat like Kevin Sullivan. And I've always found it interesting where seemingly everyone has worked everywhere. Kevin Sullivan never worked for WWE. And when I had a conversation with Kevin about that once, he said he met with Stephanie once, and she asked for a resume, and Kevin Sullivan didn't have a resume. And I understand that's not necessarily an indictment on Stephanie because she lives in a corporate world. So in a corporate world, everyone has a resume. But to ask Kevin Sullivan, what would I know you from? Well, the NWO, Goldberg, we did some things. Why do you think Kevin Sullivan never had a shot with WWE?
I don't know. I remember talking to Kevin, maybe it was in 96 or 97. He wanted to be part of creative. He thought that we could do what we had done with the Slaughterhouse on a bigger scale. You saw my live show, and I talked glowingly about Sullivan.
Yeah.
At that point, what really kept the early 1989, 1990 Cactus Jack alive in WCW was the fact that Sullivan and Corny, they had a hand. They were the ones who did creative on the Losers. That doesn't sound like a very important position, but what I mean by that is that Jim Herd left them alone to do what they wanted to do, and they came up with this great underneath angle of having me attack my partners.
Yes.
And it worked so well. Kevin came out from behind the announce booth, and we formed Sullivan's Slaughterhouse, and that's where, just recapping what we talked about in the past, this great little angle, which wasn't meant to be on top, but it was such a great character builder, and it made me, stand apart. Kevin would look over for the tag, and Kevin wrestled a very physical style, very believable brawling style. There wasn't a lot of Kevin getting together with opponents to go over the spots. It was basically, Kevin really roughing up these guys, not taking liberties, but you knew when you were in there it wasn't going to be a fun 5 minutes for those guys, right? The Tree of Woe, he was hitting you with everything he had. The punches, the kicks, were really solid in there. But he was a great creative guy, and he's brought out the best in these angles that went on to be, the home run angles for WCW. But even as a performer, as the Games Master with Rick Steiner and Mike Rotondo, that's great stuff.
Yeah.
And then they later added Dr. Death, Steve Williams, but that was a great faction, and everything that Kevin did, I think, worked on a certain level because he was a believer in heat. And, from time to time, WCW would change its emphasis on heat and how much someone was allowed to get. Like when we were the Slaughterhouse, Kevin had the whitest butcher smock.
Right.
Because there was not supposed to be any trace of blood. To the point where I think when Kevin was working with Norman the Lunatic, Kevin hit Mike Shaw with a painting, and the idea was the painting had red paint on it, so you were able to get some semblance of color.
Yes.
As silly as it was, there was, not a drop of blood allowed. I'm not saying that was silly, but I'm saying the idea that you had to get red paint involved.
Right.
To make something look like, enhanced physicality. That was the hand we were working with. They had a much freer hand. Maybe Bischoff's doing, probably. I just go and said Bischoff had a big hand in making WCW more important in the Turner organization. And Kevin was a big part of that process.
So you talked to him in 96, 97 about maybe trying to do some stuff with WWE?
Vince responded to me. He said he'd be interested in having him in creative, not really interested at that point of having him in the ring. And it didn't come to fruition. Kevin caught back on with WCW, was one of the major power players.
Yeah.
And also, as my name applies to it, he was, said to have watched the Hell in a Cell match. Me and Undertaker in 98 turned to whoever else was in that room with him from the booking committee, said, "It's over, brother." "What's over?" "The Monday Night War." They just won it. That was how he felt. Like he could see that was going to be a, a
Watershed
transformative moment. Yeah.